What's wrong with Georgia? It's a good question. It's a fair question. And I don't know, before any Disney Dog Georgia fans jump in the comment section with the nothing's wrong. Everybody had it. It's 2 weeks in a row. Something is off. Now, look, if Georgia had played this way in all 5 games, then you can say, well, there's nothing wrong with Georgia. This is just who Georgia is, right? But that's clearly not the case. You look at the Oregon game and the South Carolina game in particular, and even the Samford game to a lesser degree in week 2. So really the first 3 games of the season, clearly Georgia was a better team or played like a better team, played much better than they have the last 2 games. So what is it? What's going on? What's wrong? I made a video after week 3. It was a question, not a statement, saying, is Georgia really this good? And I started the video. I think the first thing I said in the video is, I don't know. And you know what? I still don't know. Will the real Georgia Bulldogs please stand up? The team that I saw play week 1 against Oregon and week 3 against South Carolina could beat anybody in the country. Not saying they would, but I'm saying that team has the potential to win it all. The team I've saw play the last 2 weeks does not. The team I've saw play the last 2 weeks will lose at least 1 regular season game and then the SEC championship game and won't make the playoffs. The team I saw in week 1 and week 3 will make the playoffs one way or the other, whether it's 12-0 and winning the SEC or 12-0 and losing the SEC. Either way, the team I saw play week 1 through 3 will make the playoffs. Team I've seen the last 2 weeks will not. So what's wrong? What has changed between the first 3 weeks of the season and now? What are we doing differently? What are we not doing? What was working and it's not working now? I mean, we can point at a few injuries, but the reality is 5 weeks into the season, everybody's got injuries. This isn't something that's, special to Georgia or specific to Georgia or unique to Georgia. Like, oh my God, Georgia's got a couple of players banged up and everyone else. No, everyone does. Look, Alabama's quarterback is out, Bryce Young. Clemson has had multiple defensive players miss multiple games. I mean, they had 3 or 4 miss a game against Wake the other day. Everybody has got players banged up 5 weeks into the season. I mean, this is a rough sport. People get hurt. It's sad and it's a shame, and we never like to see it. But you can't use that as an excuse, especially when you're a Georgia, an Alabama, a Clemson, and Ohio State, one of these teams that recruits in the top 5 every single year, top 10 every single year. You've got talent on your team to make up for an injury here or there. So I've never bought into injury excuses. And Jalen Carter, he was battling an ankle injury for a couple of games, then hurt his knee in the game against Mizzou. Okay, well, put Bear Alexander in, or Zion Logue's got to step up, or whatever. Name the guy. Okay, we've had some wide receivers banged up. Okay, we had wide receivers banged up all last year. Our best wide receiver, George Pickens, really didn't play at all. A couple of snaps in the SEC title game, a couple of snaps against Michigan, a couple of snaps against Bama in the title game. I mean, really didn't even play. Dominic Blaylock's been on a milk carton since the end of 2019. I mean, he barely plays now. Kearis Jackson is a shadow of what he used to be. A.D. Mitchell has been out for the last few weeks. Who knows when he's coming back? Arian Smith has been out. But we had all this last year. I don't know what the answers are, but something is clearly off. And I'm more concerned about the offense than I am the defense. I don't really think the defense has played that bad. You can't judge Georgia's defense this year against last year's Georgia's defense. That was a generational defense. I mean, we may never see a defense like that again at UGA, at least in my lifetime. But this defense is playing really, really well. They're top 5 in a lot of defensive categories. They're only giving up about 12, 13 points a game. I memean, that's amazing compared to anything other than last year's Georgia team. They're giving up more yards than we did last year. But again, look at the inside of our defense in particular was just gutted. All 3 inside linebackers, all the entire defensive front there with Wyatt, Devontae Wyatt, and Trayvon Walker and Jordan Davis. So it's to be expected, but it's not like Georgia's given up a ton of touchdowns. Georgia's given up 4 touchdowns all year. All year they're giving up less than a touchdown a game. I know, Missouri kicked a bunch of field goals, and look, the reality is you should beat a team that kicks a bunch of field goals. Missouri scored 1 touchdown against Georgia. When your defense holds the opponent to one touchdown, I don't really care how many field goals they kick. The offense needs to be able to win that game, and they almost didn't. They didn't score till the fourth quarter. The first half of the game in particular, with the 2 turnovers and really bad field position for UJ offensively, Missouri was starting the majority of their drives around their own 40-yard line. So 2 first downs and they're in field goal range. And that's been kind of the norm for Georgia. Even going back to the Oregon game, which Georgia dominated, there was very few, if any, 3-and-outs in that game for the Georgia defense. But the field position was key, right? Oregon would start the ball at their 10, 15, 20, 25-yard line. They'd get a first down or 2, get up to their own 40, bog down, and punt. Well, if in the case of the Missouri game, they're starting on their own 40. They're getting a couple of first downs. By that point, they're on the Georgia 35 kicking a field goal. So, I don't think the defense played any worse against Missouri than they did against Oregon, is basically what I'm trying to say. I think the defense played well and definitely played good enough to win the game. The problems that I see are offensive. Not that the defense is perfect. I can nitpick that. Kamari Lassiter is a liability. The defensive line is not playing as well as I think it could play. And I'm not even comparing it to last year. I'm just talking about the ability for this year. I don't like the fact that for whatever reason we've seen unable to sack the quarterback. But overall, the defense is playing well enough to win these games. And the defense is winning these games. It's the offense that's letting us down. It's the offense that's shitting the bed at UGA. Is Stetson Bennett ever going to throw another touchdown pass? Stetson Bennett hasn't thrown a touchdown pass since week 3. 2 consecutive games now against bad teams, Kent State and Missouri, 0 touchdown passes for Stetson Bennett. Now he's putting up a ton of yards. And look, I'm not going to get on here and bash Stetson Bennett. Okay, what I'm about to say is not me bashing Stetson Bennett. It's reality. If you've watched Georgia play, whether you're a Georgia fan or someone else, Stetson's putting up a ton of yards, throwing hitch passes at or behind the line of scrimmage. Very few passes downfield. Very few. Very few. A lot of snap the ball and immediately throw it to Brock Bowers behind the line on a screen, or throw it to Ladd McConkey on a screen, or Kenny McIntosh on a swing route out of the backfield. It seems like about 90% of Georgia passes are within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage or behind the line of scrimmage. So he is putting up a ton of yards, but it's not like he's out here throwing 30 and 40-yard lasers down the field. Can he do it? Yes. Has he done it a time or two this year? Yes. But in general, this offense is not what I hoped it would be at all. I'm not blaming Stetson. I'm just saying that's what's happening in the games. Will it help to get a guy like A.D. Mitchell back? Of course it will. Will it help to get Aaron Smith back? Of course it will. Here's the problem. How confident are you we're really ever going to see those guys again? I don't know what it is. I don't think it's something that Kirby is consciously or purposely doing, but it just seems like if you get hurt on offense and you have to miss more than a game or 2, that's it. Your time at Georgia is over. That's just what it seems like, going all the way back to Jacob Eason. George Pickens got hurt. He was coming back soon for 3 months, never came back. Dominic Blaylock's been about to be 100% since this time last year. Kearis Jackson, same thing last year. These guys, they're starters. They play great. Go look at the highlights from Dominic Blaylock in 2019. Dude was the best receiver on the team. And now he can't get on the field. Kearis Jackson really is good for nothing except fair catching punts anymore. He got hurt. He's gone. It's people, and then you look out there and it's Ladd McConkey, Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint, A.D. Mitchell when he's healthy, which again, are we ever going to see him again? Arian Smith, look, Arian Smith's healthy and good to go, but for one play though, I don't understand. It's just strange. I don't know what the answers is to that. I can tell you right now, we don't have, Georgia's got a whole lot of pretty good number 2 wide receivers. They don't have a number 1. That's a problem. There's no George Pickens. There's no, name the top 15, 20, 30 wide receivers in college football in any given year. There's none of that at Georgia right now. It doesn't exist. You got a bunch of slot receivers and a couple of decent number 2 wideouts. Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint, is he bad? No. Is he pretty good? He's okay. He's no elite threat. There's no defense game planning around Marcus Rosemy-Jack Saint. There's just not. So what does Georgia have to do? Can they fix it? Yeah, I think they can. Part of it may be just kind of sleepwalking. I don't know. It's hard. I can see the Kent State game. It was at noon. It's a lower classification team. I can see the team showing up for that game unmotivated, at noon like that. I know Missouri's a bad team, but it's hard for me to imagine Georgia showed up for an SEC road game at night unmotivated like it was just another Kent State or Samford. I find that hard to believe. I think they just got outplayed. I don't think Georgia coasted during practice this past week because they were playing Missouri. I think Georgia took Missouri seriously. And that's even worse than what happened against Kent State. You took Missouri seriously. You came out ready to play, and you got absolutely dominated by them in the first half along the lines of scrimmage. We got outcoached and out-schemed in one of the worst ways I've ever seen a Kirby Smart staff get outcoached and out-schemed in the first half of that game. Now, there was a drastic change at halftime. Georgia outscored Missouri in the second half 20-3. And that includes Georgia taking a knee on the last drive of the game down close to Missouri's goal line. So that could easily have been another 7 points, which would have been 27-3. You do that in both halves of the game, you win this game something like 45-6, and then no one's talking about it this week, because that's what people expected. But that first half was inexcusable, completely inexcusable. There's a lot of praise being heaped on Georgia for the running game in the fourth quarter. And I'll be the first to tell you, the running game was amazing in the fourth quarter. It salted the game away, put the game on ice. But what about the first half? The first half we couldn't get a yard. Fourth quarter, Missouri had 11 people in the box in the fourth quarter and couldn't stop the run. What's the difference? Well, you know what the difference is? Missouri was wore out. Teams like Missouri, their starting 11 on defense might be okay, but they can't rotate players in and out like a Georgia can. So you get to the fourth quarter against a team like Mizzou, they just done give out. That's all it was. I don't know that Georgia figured out some magic elixir at halftime that taught them how to run the ball in the second half. I think Missouri just gave out. So I don't know. But Georgia's got to get it together. They play Auburn at home this week. Regardless of how bad Auburn is, that's a rivalry game. It's not a noon game. It's a 3:30 game. It's on CBS. If Georgia can't show up this week ready to go, looking a lot more like the team I saw against Oregon and South Carolina instead of the team I saw against Kent State and Mizzou, then we're at a point now where I think whatever the issues are, they can't be fixed. I'm willing to hang on for the ride. Sort of, glass half full type of deal in terms of potential playoff spots and things like that for another week here. But all I've heard, and it's true, is that the first half of Georgia's schedule is a lot easier than the second half, and I could not agree more. If you look at Georgia's run of games right now, I think the Oregon game, that was a huge win. Look, Oregon is blowing people out. That's their only loss. They're ranked 12th. They're probably going to be in the top 10 after this coming week because there's going to be some teams ahead of them that lose, and Oregon's going to win again. That's an impressive win. But other than that, you look at the run of games after that. Samford, South Carolina, Kent State, Mizzou, all terrible. Auburn, terrible. Next week, Vandy, terrible. So it's just... And then we have a bye week, right? So the first half of the season, you looked at that and you're like, well, outside of the Oregon game, why even watch? Well, it turns out we might need to watch. These are heart-stopping games against the likes of Mizzou. And then the second half of the schedule comes around for UJ. You come out of the bye week. You got Florida, neutral site in Jacksonville. You got Tennessee at home. You got to go on the road to Mississippi State and then on the road to Kentucky. And then you wrap things up at the end of the year with a beating of Georgia Tech. So, all offseason, the second half of the schedule is much tougher than the first. Season starts, same thing. Second half of the schedule, much tougher than the first. Is the team buying into all that and waiting? I don't know. I don't think, like I said, with the Kent State game, it's easy to kind of make the excuse of, well, Georgia just kind of went through the motions. I don't buy that for this past week. I think Georgia just got whipped in the first half. And I don't know. So I'm going to hang on for this week. For some reason, Georgia's a 29-point favorite in this game. The line, and here's what's even more strange about that, because people are going to say that's crazy. I've seen Georgia play the last 2 weeks. They shouldn't be favored by 29 over anybody. Well, here's what's even more crazy. The line came out at 24. People have bet it up. If you don't know how betting works, Vegas or whatever casino or sportsbook or whatever, they set an initial line on a game. In the case of Georgia and Auburn, they set a line of 24. Well, based on how people bet, the casino or the sportsbook or whoever will move that line up or down. So when the line was at 24, if a bunch of people start putting money on Georgia at 24, they're going to move that line up to 25, and then 26, and then 27. They're going to move it up as high as they have to move it to get people to start betting the other way. Because the goal of a casino or a sports book is to get the same amount of money placed on both sides of the bet. That way, no matter who wins the game, they win the 10%. They win the juice or whatever. So when a line moves, that's because money has been bet on one side or the other. So this thing came out at 24, and for whatever reason, a bunch of people put a bunch of money on Georgia at minus 24 over Auburn. I don't know. They must know something I don't know. They must have a lot more confidence than Uncle Lou has. I'm going to cross my fingers this week and hope we, humiliate the barn like we should. Again, they're a terrible team. So was Mizzou. So was Kent State. And Georgia came out and laid eggs in those games. Georgia is way too talented to be playing like that against teams like Kent State and Mizzou and Auburn. And I'm getting tired of hearing about, Georgia's just young. No, they're not. They are not young. They're a little young on defense. Defense is not the problem. The offense is the problem, and it's not young at all. Stetson Bennett's been in college since the iPhone was invented. He's not young. Both the running backs have been there for 3 years and played a ton. They're not young. Ladd McConkey started all of last year. He's not young. Brock Bowers started all of last year. He's not young. Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint has been here since like 2020 or 2019. He's not young. Arian Smith's been here. Don Blaylock's been here since 2019. The offensive linemen, none of them are freshmen. They've all been here. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? They're young. This is one of the most veteran offenses in the SEC. I don't know what y'all are talking about. I don't. The defense is young. You're starting 2 true freshmen on the defense and a bunch of sophomores and juniors who've never started. But defense is not the issue. The defense is playing great. They've given up 4 touchdowns all year. All year. 3 points to Oregon, 0 to Samford, 7 to South Carolina, 22 to Kent State, and 22 to Mizzou. The Mizzou game, 5 field goals. And I told you about that. 2 turnovers in the second half. That means you give Mizzou extra possessions and plus territory. And the field position situation. We were punting from our 10-yard line. Mizzou was starting drives at their own at their own 40, getting 2 first downs, and then kicking 50-yard field goals. That's not the defense's fault. They gave up 1 touchdown. The defense is playing great, so stop with it's just because we're young. No. It's because we're playing bad. The coaches need to get it together. Todd Monken's game plan was doo-doo, and there's not a bigger Todd Monken fan or supporter than I love Todd Monken. But he got owned in the first half of that Missouri game. That can't happen again. I'm going to hang on for one more week. I expect Georgia to come out and win this game against Auburn impressively.